This news is funded by viewers like you. Please support our work at democracynow.org/give. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Gaza's health ministry says at least 241 Palestinians have been killed over the past 24 hours. That's 10 an hour, as Israel intensifies its assault on Gaza, where the overall death toll has topped 21,000, including 8,000 children. Meanwhile, in the occupied West Bank, an Israeli drone strike has killed 6 Palestinians in the Ner Shams refugee camp near Tulkarm during an Israeli raid. Al Jazeera reports Israeli forces blocked ambulances from reaching the victims of the strike. The youngest victim was 16 years old. Israeli forces and settlers have killed at least 300 Palestinians in the occupied West Bank since Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th. Egypt's proposed a plan for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, but on Tuesday, Israel's army chief said Israel's military operation in Gaza will continue for, quote, many more months. Hamas has also rejected elements of the Egyptian proposal. On Tuesday, the bodies of about 80 unidentified Palestinians were buried in a mass grave in Rafah in southern Gaza. Israel had seized the bodies in northern Gaza in order to determine if any of them were dead Israeli hostages. Israel then returned the bodies to Gaza through the Kerem Shalom crossing. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has reportedly endorsed expelling all Palestinians from Gaza. Israeli news outlets report Netanyahu told a group of Israeli lawmakers Monday, quote, regarding voluntary immigration, this is the direction we're going in, he said. Palestinian leaders denounced Netanyahu for embracing what they describe as ethnic cleansing. The 11-week Israeli assault has already forced more than 85% of Palestinians in Gaza to leave their homes, and many have no homes to return to. Displaced Palestinians say there are no safe places remaining in Gaza.
We were displaced. We were bombed by aircraft, and the school was not safe. So we went out, and while we were leaving, there were snipers and people were martyred. We have been out for 2 days, and the situation has not improved. The plane is bombing from above, and the snipers as well.
Israel's bombardment of Gaza has also led to a growing public health catastrophe as disease spreads due to contaminated water supplies, the buildup of untreated sewage, and the lack of medical care. Some Israeli officials have openly praised the spread of diseases in Gaza. In November, retired Major General Giora Eiland, who still advises Israel's defense minister, wrote, quote, severe epidemics in the south of the Gaza Strip will bring victory closer, unquote. The public health crisis in Gaza is also impacting Israeli soldiers. The Times of Israel reports one soldier died after being infected by a harmful fungus in Gaza. At least 10 other Israeli troops were infected after being exposed to soil contaminated with sewage waste. Meanwhile, 3 more Israeli soldiers have died in Gaza. 154 Israeli soldiers have been killed in Gaza since Israel launched its ground invasion. An 18-year-old Israeli teenager who refused to enlist in the Israeli army has been sentenced to 30 days in prison. Tal Mitnick spoke out against Israel's assault on Gaza before his sentencing Tuesday.
I'm standing today in Tel HaShomer base, and I am refusing to enlist. I believe that slaughter cannot solve slaughter. The criminal attack on Gaza won't solve the atrocious slaughter that Hamas executed. Violence won't solve violence, and that is why I refuse.
Israel's announced it will stop automatically granting visas to employees of the United Nations after it accused the UN of being, quote, complicit partners with Hamas. Top United Nations officials have repeatedly called for a ceasefire in Gaza while demanding more humanitarian aid into the besieged territory. The Pentagon saying it intercepted and shot down 12 drone attacks, 3 anti-ship ballistic missiles, and 2 land attack cruise missiles launched by Yemeni Houthi forces in the Red Sea during a 10-hour period on Tuesday. This comes as concern grows over a wider regional war in the Middle East. The Houthis have vowed to keep carrying out attacks on ships in the Red Sea to show solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza.
In support of the Palestinian people's oppression, who continue to suffer from killings, destruction, siege, and starvation, the naval forces of the Yemeni armed forces, with the help of Allah, carried out a targeted operation against the commercial ship MSC United using suitable naval missiles.
Ukrainian forces struck a large Russian warship at a port in occupied Crimea on Tuesday in what's been described as one of the most significant attacks against Moscow's Black Sea Fleet in months. But the attack comes as Ukrainian officials have acknowledged Russia has seized the frontline town of Mariinka in eastern Ukraine after a month-long battle in the latest setback to Ukraine's failed counteroffensive. Sweden's a step closer to joining the NATO military alliance. On Tuesday, a parliamentary committee in Turkey approved Sweden's application to join NATO. Turkey's full parliament must now vote on the issue, but a vote has not yet been scheduled. Turkey and Hungary are the only NATO nations which have not yet approved Sweden's bid. Last week, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said the final vote hinges on whether the U.S. Congress approves selling 40 F-16 fighter jets to Turkey. Erdogan's also calling on Canada to lift an arms embargo on Turkey. U.S. Secretary of State Tony Blinken, Homeland Security Chief Alejandro Mayorkas, and White House Homeland Security Advisor Liz Sherwood Randall are meeting today with Mexican President AMLO, that's Andrés Manuel López Obrador, in Mexico City. Blinken is preparing to discuss what his office has described as border security challenges and, quote, unprecedented irregular migration in the Western Hemisphere, unquote. Andrés Manuel López Obrador is expected to call again for the Biden administration to lift sanctions against Cuba and Venezuela, which AMLO says has driven an increase in migration. This comes as a caravan with over 6,000 migrants are heading towards the U.S.-Mexico border. Some participants in the caravan are holding banners that read, quote, "Exodus from poverty," unquote. Other caravan participants said they're fleeing violence at home. This is Jose Santos from Honduras.
I came here escaping from the MS-13 criminal gang. I worked as a security guard. MS-13 asked us for money, but we didn't have any. They wanted our ammunition, but as guards, we only received a limited amount of ammunition. They threatened to kill me, not once, but 3 times. I was scared, so I decided to come to Mexico, hoping I'll be allowed to go to the U.S.
In related news, CNN's reporting more than 11,000 people seeking refuge in the United States are waiting in shelters and camps on the Mexican side of the border. Opposition candidates in the Democratic Republic of Congo are accusing the nation's electoral commission of committing massive fraud during last week's election. Initial results show incumbent Felix Tshisekedi has a large lead over more than 24 rivals, including the Nobel Peace Laureate Dr. Denis Mukwege. Opposition parties have announced plans to defy a ban on election-related protests by staging a march in the capital, Kinshasa, today. In Nigeria, armed groups have killed at least 160 people in a series of attacks on villages in the central Nigerian state of Plateau. Amnesty International criticized the federal government of Nigeria for failing to do more to protect rural communities in the region, which have come under numerous deadly attacks. Japan is moving closer to reopening the world's largest nuclear power plant, which was shut down following the Fukushima nuclear disaster in 2011. Earlier today, Japan's nuclear regulator lifted its safety ban on the plant, which is run by TEPCO, that's Tokyo Electric Power. Local government bodies still need to sign off on the plant's reopening. To see our broadcast from Tokyo, go to democracynow.org. The U.S. State Department has placed several prosecutors in Guatemala on a corruption blacklist over their attempts to block Guatemala's president-elect, Bernardo Arévalo, from taking office. Arévalo, who's scheduled to be inaugurated January 14th, has accused his opponents of waging a slow-motion coup d'etat by attempting to overturn his election victory. The longtime New York activist Ralph Poynter has died. Poynter was a retired New York school teacher who was a longtime advocate for political prisoners and a radio host on Pacifica station WBAI here in New York. He was married to the prominent radical attorney Lynn Stewart, who died in 2017. Ralph Poynter helped lead efforts to free Lynn Stewart, who was jailed for 4 years for distributing press releases on behalf of her jailed client, the Egyptian cleric Omar Abdel-Rahman. And the acclaimed South Korean actor Lee Sung-kyun has died at the age of 48. He starred in the film Parasite, which in 2020 became the first foreign language film to win Best Picture at the Oscars. Police found Lee Sun-kyun unconscious in a car in Seoul shortly after his wife had reported that he'd left behind what appeared to be a suicide note. He'd been under investigation for violating South Korea's strict drug laws. He was recently questioned by police for 19 hours. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York, joined by Democracy Now! Co-host Juan Gonzalez in Chicago. Hi, Juan.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.
Democracy Now! Is funded by viewers like you. Please give today at democracynow.org/give.